lot of ways than we thought. I'd say the first weekend that we got into it, we were really overwhelmed and God, it wasn't for us.
It's scary at first. You know, you go from having a routine with your own kid and they know you and they know how things work and you get along and exist really well, and then all of a sudden you throw a fireball in there and you have no idea what's going to happen.
It takes a really well-balanced, strong person to be a foster parent and to truly believe in the value of fostering, whether temporarily or over the long run. The way that I see it is we ask you to take a child into your home and your heart and love them as if they were your own, and then give them back.
Foster care is not meant to keep families apart. They want to reunite families after they have done whatever it is they need to do to become a whole family again. Whatever tore them apart or whatever reason they came into foster care, the agencies work with their biological family to help them become whole again. And when that process is completed, then reunification can take place.
So one of the big misconceptions is that these are all troubled youth, that they have psychiatric disorders, that the problem is them, and that's just not the case. So I think it's that there's a stigma, and that often these kids feel stigmatized, and it can become a vicious circle.
From a foster child's perspective, and I grew up in foster care myself, it's a lot about survival. You know, we come into an environment and we think, what do we need to survive? Who are the people who are going to help us and hurt us? How are we going to make sure we take care of ourselves? So a lot of times when we come to an environment, it's not about exploration and learning and excitement. It's about, how do I establish my safety here right now? I would say every child from foster care is exposed to trauma, regardless of whether they've been exposed to trauma prior to coming into foster care. Foster care is a traumatizing experience for them, you know, to be ripped away from your family, your friends, your culture, your siblings, your school. I mean, all of that is part of your identity to be taken away from you.
I think the problem is confusing the challenging experiences with being a challenged individual, and they are not the same thing. But too often kids in foster care are seen as it's the same. The troubled experience or trauma they've experienced has then somehow damaged them as children. And that in itself creates a whole set of damaging experiences.
So could you tell me your name and profession?
My name's Sarah Gurney, and I'm an occupational therapist in a school system.
What disabilities do most of these kids who come in who you work with have?
In the foster care system?
Yeah.
Well, I really only have 2 kids, and they both have cognitive delays.
Okay, and why do you think that is? What's the cause for that?
One of the kids has a head injury from abuse, and the other one, I'm not really sure. It's probably partially genetics, maybe, partially neglect, lack of stimulation when they were young.
Do you think, or do you see an improvement in these children's learning abilities once you're done working with them?
I think so, yeah. I think they've both made great progress. It's not just me working with them. In the whole school system, they have physical therapist, and they have a speech therapist, and special intervention teachers, and I think the whole team of people working to help them has helped them make great improvements.
So is it hard or is it easy for you to connect with these children?
The kids I have are very easy to connect with, mostly because they often crave adult attention, and they're great kids.
And what kind of activities and things do you do with these children?
Well, I'm an occupational therapist, so I work on fine motor skills, sensory processing, things that interfere with their occupation of learning in the school system. So anything that they have difficulty with that interferes with the learning, I work on.
All right. Well, thank you.
You're very welcome.
It's a cold and hard-edged phrase, every bit as ruthless as the process it describes. And what it describes is that unseen line that kids in foster care cross when they turn 18, the line that puts young residents of this community, who are more vulnerable than they look, into a sometimes hostile and frightening world.
It's just frightening, really, because you don't know what to do.
Aged out refers to what happens to foster children seemingly overnight. One day you're 17 and in foster care, the next you're 18 and frequently on your own.
I wasn't really sure what I was going to do at that point. I really didn't know where I was going to go.
Dana, Tevin, and Alexis all aged out of foster care. All went from some level of security to a high state of insecurity, scratching to survive, often breaking the law to do so.
Going hungry until you find a program that will take you in, feed you.
So I just turned to criminal behaviors because I had nowhere else to go, and I knew if I was in jail, I have a meal, you know, I'll be able to sleep peaceful somewhat at night.
Under an overpass in Cincinnati, the kind of place that some kids who have aged out of the foster care system with no place to go might end up. In the most recent federal statistics from 2011, there were 400,000 kids in foster care. That year, 26,000 of them aged out. Those numbers are so huge that in Cincinnati at Lighthouse Youth Services Shakely Center, there is always a waiting list for its 29 temporary beds.
We're carrying 100 to 200 clients on the streets every day who are sleeping under a bridge in an abandoned building.
And whether in a facility or on the streets, ahead of them all, a greater likelihood of homelessness, unemployment, illness, and incarceration. Partially that's because when they age out, these 18-year-olds have little in the way of life skills.
Well, first, I didn't know how to cook. I didn't know how to ride the bus.
These former foster kids and those who cared for them say the failure to teach life skills before kids age out is the greatest failure of the public-private system offering foster care. And they all agree the ultimate solution is to keep foster children in the system until age 21.
We would still be in their lives. So instead of ending up homeless, they come back to their county worker and say, hey, I'm really struggling financially, I can't make these payments, give me some support and direction.
These 3 former foster children are no longer homeless.
I actually have a place that I can call my own now.
Dana has a job and wants to pursue a career in the medical field. Alexis is planning a career in the hospitality industry, but also has a dream born of her experience.
I want to be an advocate for foster care youth.
Tevin plans to enroll in Northern Kentucky University and major in special education. He too spoke from his experience.
Just don't leave us by ourselves, support us in some type of way so we feel like we were actually wanted.
There is hope and maybe help on the horizon. In January, 2 Ohio lawmakers added language to a state job and family services bill that will allow the state to provide services to young people in foster care up to the age of 21 using federal funds. If House Bill 423 passes, it could ease the transition from foster care to adulthood. Oh, and there is, by the way, always a critical need for foster parents. Lighthouse Youth Services is offering foster parent and adoption training April 7th. We have a link to that information at WCPO.com.